Hello students, today we will discuss about government NGO relationship. Basically NGOs are playing a very vital role in the developmental process of any country, and they are supplementing the government in various manner for different welfare related and developmental activities. And nowadays a lot of complexities are there, therefore they are focusing their shift towards developmental aspects like capacity building, advocacy, networking, human rights and social justice. In this context, we must understand government NGO relationship because they are supplementing as well as complementing to the government for providing services to the masses and reaching to the masses. And the objective of this section are basically to provide an overview about government NGO relationship, to trace the initiative of voluntary action in the pre and post independence phase in India, to explore the characteristic feature of government NGO interface, and to examine the government policies towards NGOs. So, basically these four are objectives upon which the whole discussion would be based. The major contents of this lecture are initiation of voluntary activities in India. It is further divided into three parts: pre-independent phase, post-independent phase and present status of NGOs in India. Then government NGO relationship, government NGO interface and then policies towards NGOs. So, firstly there is absolutely no doubt about it, NGOs are increasingly becoming an important force because of claim that they are efficient, effective, innovative, flexible, independent and responsible to the problems of masses, and therefore governments are also relying upon them. NGOs have been engaged in all sectors of social life such as relief, rehabilitation, health, education, development program, peace, human rights and environmental issues. So, we can understand they are covering all the aspect of social life of individuals. In view of increasing concern of social justice, inclusive development and empowerment of weaker section and vulnerable section, the role of NGO has increased tremendously, and therefore government NGO relationship is very important. It is a lifeline for the welfare and development of masses of any nation. Now, let us talk about initiation of voluntary activities in India. So, it is further divided into three sections, and firstly let us talk about the pre-independent phase, but before that I must say that it is essential to trace these phases because then only we can understand how government NGO relationship developed in most significant manner gradually. So, volunteerism in India was based on the concept of dana, charity and seva or service in earlier days. So, these were the fundamental, and if we trace the historical background of Indian social system, then we can understand basically these were also prevailed in the ashram system also. These charity or services, people were bound to provide charity or services to the needy one, and that was the foundation upon which further it was developed in a more professional manner. In earlier days, voluntary organizations were active in cultural promotion, education, health and natural disasters. So, we can say these were conventional practices and still these are continue along with some other developmental aspect nowadays. The introduction of Western ideas by the end of the 18th century caused the widespread emergence of religious and social reform movements in our country during first half of the 19th century. This was the era when many of the Christian missionaries also entered into our country, and they started campaigning about their religion. So, that was the alarming situation for Indian social reformers. They initiated to have a reform movement into Indian social system. Many of the social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Dayanand Saraswati, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, Keshav Chand Sen, Ramakrishna Paramhans, Swami Vivekananda had focused their action against the rigid social labels and practices like sati, child marriages, prohibition of widow remarriage and other caste based practices, because that was essential to restrict the campaign of missionaries at that time. That was psyche around that. And the second half of the 19th century had witnessed the steady evolution and growth of volunteerism due to continued effort of reformers and the growing socio-political awareness. That was the era we were confronting the British government, and we were trying to get the freedom from Britishers. Therefore, socio-political awareness was very much there at that era, and many of the initiative took place in that context and direction. Numerous organizations were established during this period, including Friend in Need Society, Prarthana Samaj, Satya Shodhan Samaj, Arya Samaj and National Council for Women in India. And most significantly, the Society Registration Act was approved in 1860 to confirm the legal status of growing body of voluntary organization. This was the first landmark effort by the government, and definitely it was British government who initiated for the registration of voluntary organization under Society Registration Act. So, we can say and still it is continuing to be the effective act with amendments from time to time. And again there was another secular voluntary organization named Servant of India Society was established in 1905, because at that time many of the religious organizations were also working. Therefore, I am stressing too much upon it was one of the secular organization. And after that Mahatma Gandhi came into the picture of volunteerism, and he started his work and between 1922 to 28 basically, which entailed among others charkha, khadi, gramodyog and basic education, removal of untouchability, etc. And he also emphasized upon education of girls, and he also raised his voice for the depressed class of the society, and he founded Harjan Sevak Sangh, Gramodyog Sangh, Hindustan Talim Sangh. And if we trace the overall background of volunteerism and NGO sector in our country, we will find that as far as the volunteerism is concerned, Mahatma Gandhian impact is too much. Let us talk about post-independent phase. After independence, the government of India increased its presence in social welfare, but recognized the potential of voluntary sector to supplement its effort. We can say basically government of India immediate after independence tried to rely upon the voluntary sector. So, we can say ultimately right from beginning there was an impression that government of India was having a positive stance towards the voluntary sector. Many of the prominent followers of Mahatma Gandhi inculcated his spirit of voluntary efforts in the post independence era, and prominent among them were Acharya Vinoba Bhave and Jayaprakash Narayan. Acharya Vinoba Bhave came forward with the idea of Gran Dan and Bhudan. The Central Social Welfare Board was established in 1953 in order to promote social welfare and development through NGOs, was another the landmark initiative by the government in this regard. In 1958, the Association for Voluntary Agencies for Rural Development Award was founded as a consortium of major voluntary agencies. After that, during the late 60s, many international NGOs started entering in India in a significant numbers to provide drought relief. Hence, we can say the foreign funds began flowing to the domestic NGOs in India. So, it was also considered as the another landmark. During the 70s and 80s, NGOs began to be formally recognized as development partners of the organization. So, here we can say earlier NGOs were supplementing the government, but after this era they were equal partner to the government. So, that was one of the significant change. So, we can understand the trend of changes were taking place at that time. During the 90s, NGOs have emerged as important players in the development arena. Role of NGO was particularly recognized at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development held at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in June 1992. Thereafter, active presence of NGO continued at all the important global international forums such as Copenhagen World Summit on Social Development 1995, the Beijing Conference of Women 1995 and so on. Now, we will understand the present status of NGOs in India. Today, around 3 million NGOs are working in India basically, and they are working in different sectors like child setting, women, disability, they are working with the marginalized section, they are dealing with the human rights and social justice. A database on voluntary organization compiled by NEPSID in 2007 reveals that over half of the organization, around 50.32% reported that they were carrying out health related activities such as community health services, health education, health checkup, health camps, RCH, HIV and AIDS. We can understand that many of the NGOs are involved commonly into health sector along with some other core or thrust area they are taking up, but health is one of the core area because a lot of health related issues are prime concern for the NGOs as well as the government of India. So, they are providing their support to the government through their such initiatives, and we can say that NGOs are either in supplementary role with the NGOs or they are in a partnership role, but definitely they are one of the important pillars upon which government can rely, and they are initiating their welfare and development activities. Now, in this section actually we will talk about government NGO relationship, how the relationship are basically. Government NGO relationship is dynamic and ever changing in nature because it is shaped and directed by the relationship between NGOs and state. The government controls and curbs NGOs action depending upon its changing needs. The prominent method of this control is control by laws and legislation. The government enacts a variety of regulatory mechanisms through its agencies as well as through laws and legislations. The legislation directly affect NGOs in India are the Society Registration Act 1860, we have discussed earlier about this act. Then another act is there, Income Tax Act 1961, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act 1976. So, these are the act. So, basically we can say the focus is upon how to ensure transparency and accountability of NGOs. So, basically government is trying to keep its eyes open to watch the irregularities of fund of the NGOs. The government controls and regulates the functioning of NGOs through registration under an appropriate act, enforcement of minimum standards through statutes, licensing under appropriate legislation, inspection by the inspectorate of grant giving department, the work of organization to be as per condition of grant regulation. So, these are the main areas upon which government has to focus, and they continuously monitoring the efforts of NGOs, and they are taking them under the purview of different legislations. After understanding government NGO relationship, we need to understand about government NGO interface. Basically, interface refers to a type of relationship between two partners, those who are working in the same direction and with the same type of target population, And definitely in this regard, we are talking about government and NGOs, those who are providing their services to the same stakeholders and same target population. Those are marginalized people, those are masses of the country. So, we need to understand government NGO interface. In this direction, we can say the decade of 1990s witnessed an improved interface between the government and NGOs, and NGOs worked significantly for different government development programs and provided their services, and which was highly appreciated by government of India. The 1990 also saw the establishment of several forums to promote dialogue between government and NGOs. The Planning Commission initiated a government NGO interface through a series of conferences. In 1994, the Planning Commission had initiated a dialogue between the government and NGOs, and 2-day convention about 100 NGOs from different part of the country was held. And after that conference, they adopted a particular plan of action, and which plan of action was basically related with the relationship of NGO and government, how they will work together. And after that, the Council for Advancement of People's Action and Rural Technology (CAPART) was set up in 1986, and it is an autonomous body which is working under the Ministry of Rural Development. NGOs approach to government now, we can say, ranges from strongly oppositional to closely collaborative. So, we can say there is a mixed model into that, because sometimes we can see NGOs are working with the government, and sometimes they are opposing if the issue is arise related to social right or human justice, if they are working on RTI issues, and definitely they are opposing to the government. So, there is a mixed response of NGOs in this regard, we can say. So, interface is quite diverse, we can say. After talking about government NGO relationship and interface as well, it is essential to talk about government policies towards NGOs. The crucial role of NGOs in welfare and development has been well recognized by the government of India ever since the first 5-year plan in 1951. The year 1953 was the turning point in the history of government NGO relationship, when the government of India established the Central Social Welfare Board, because through Central Social Welfare Board they started funding to the non-government organization. The government of India has not only been giving wide recognition to volunteer efforts, but also promotes and develops NGOs by providing assistance, both financial and technical. Gradual and growing interdependence between government and NGOs in India is marked in the post-independence era. Hence, we can say government takes a positive stance towards NGOs. Let us take a look about national policy on volunteer sector, which was approved by government of India in 2007, and it was the first step in a process to evolve a new working relationship with the NGOs. It recognizes that the volunteer sector has contributed significantly to finding solutions to poverty, deprivation, discrimination and exclusion through awareness generation, social mobilization, service delivery, training, research and advocacy. This policy has 4 major objectives. First one is create an enabling environment for volunteer organization that stimulates their enterprise and effectiveness and safeguard their autonomy. Enable volunteer organization to legitimately mobilize necessary local and foreign financial resources. The third in this category is identify systems by which the government may work together with voluntary organization based on the principle of mutual trust and respect and with shared responsibility. Fourth and last objective is encourage volunteer organization to adopt transparent, accountable system of governance and management. Among the specific central government actions cited in the policy are encouraging state governments to simplify, liberalize and rationalize laws and rules on registration of volunteer organization, examining the feasibility of enacting a simple liberal central law to serve as an alternative all India structure for voluntary organization registration, encouraging the evolution of an independent national self-regulatory agency for the volunteer sector. Other policy steps include considering tax rebate for transfer of shares and stock options to volunteer organization, simplifying provisions of the FCRA, introducing training modules for government employees on constructive relations with the volunteer sector, creating joint consultative groups comprising government and volunteer organization representatives, identifying national collaborative programs to be implemented in partnership with the volunteer organization, supporting philanthropic institutions and foundations that provide financial assistance to deserving volunteer organizations, recognizing excellence in governance among volunteer organizations by publicizing their best practices. To conclude, we can say NGOs are considered as lifeline for the enforcement and enhancement of social, economic and political justice to the people, because they are working at grassroots level, they have their resources and they are knowing the nerves of the people, and government is also realizing this fact, and therefore they are largely dependent upon NGOs.